You only have 3 vertices here, and so give me the coordinates of the 4th one after you plot these 3. In other words, get accustomed to being able to plot coordinates that are in a variable. Don't know what that variable is, but assume that it's positive. Let's do that. Assume that this is a positive number, and tell me what the 4th vertex is going to be. Now, let me show you an example of how the coordinate grid can be helpful to us, or coordinate proof can be helpful to us. Here is a triangle, and this is our mid-segment. And so what does the mid-segment do? Remember, it goes from where to where? It goes from midpoint to midpoint. And so we're going to prove this theorem, mid-segment theorem. And the way we're going to do that here is to first of all figure out what the coordinates of point D are. And remember, this is the midpoint of this side, so I take the average of 0 plus 2q, so there's 2q plus 0, and divide that by 2. And when I do that, I get just q by itself. And then let's do the average of the y coordinates. 0 plus 2r is going to, and when you divide it by 2, you get r. So that's pretty cool, isn't it? That D here, the mid-segment, or the midpoint, coordinates of the midpoint, are q, comma, r. So when we start out with B being at 2q, comma, 2r, it's, and we find the midpoint, it's rather simple. We just find half of the q, half of the 2q, which is q, and half of the 2r, which is r. So it kind of unfolds rather nice and simple. And let's do the same thing for this other point. Not quite as simple, but close. So we add these two, add 2q plus 2p. Those are your x coordinates here, and then divide by 2. And when we do, and simplify, we get q plus p. And then let's also do the y coordinate. So it's 2r plus 0, and divided by 2, that'd be r. Okay, so that's reasonably simple also. Now, in order to be able to prove the different characteristics of these mid-segments, remember the first characteristic that we talked about was that they are parallel. The mid-segment is parallel to the third side. And we can see that since the y coordinate does not change, it goes from r to r between these midpoints, therefore your slope is going to be 0, and the slope of this third side is also 0. So yes, even though right now it's placed on this x-axis, yet because these are variables, it doesn't matter what the orientation of this triangle would be and what numbers we plug in there, we're still going to get the same answer. And so we have just proven that your mid-segment and your third side will always be parallel. And we can also then figure out the distance. We know that the distance between the midpoints, the coordinates of this point here are q plus r, comma, r. So the distance from D, which is at q on your x-axis, or the x-coordinate, over to q plus r, so going from q to q plus r, that's the distance of r. All right? Did I get that right? I think there's something wrong with that. Oh no, this should be a p. There you go, that makes more sense. Okay, going from q to q plus p, that's a distance of p. Yep, because you're subtracting the q from that, and you're left with just p. And then the distance from O to C is going to be 2p. So from p to 2p, well, not from, between those two, but notice that the length of this on the top here is p, and the length on the bottom one is 2p. So it does not matter what numbers we plug in there. Again, you're still going to have, whatever the value of p is, the length of, so it doesn't matter what the length of the midsegment is, the length of the third side will always be double that length. So we have just proven the midsegment theorem using coordinate proofs. And your role now is with number 7 in the triangle to the right. Find the coordinates of point F, which is the midpoint of segment OC. So here is segment OC, and what are the coordinates of this point, and then show that where's EF? Oh, that's going to be the point to your midpoint. Show that the slope of EF is the same as the slope of OB. Okay, remember slope is rise over run, like we just did a moment ago. To some extent, we talked about it at least. And so do the rise. The rise over here would be 2r. The run here would be 2q. And then find the coordinates of this point, and let's find the slope between those two. Okay, and hope that was helpful, and may the Lord bless you, and we look forward to seeing you in class.